I'd like to bring up before we close something you mentioned in the book that I think is extremely important and relevant, and something I think about all the time, which is this therapeutic spirituality dominating the church. That psychology, in many ways, has gutted, in sometimes major ways or sometimes in very subtle ways, traditional Catholic notions of the spiritual life and the development of the moral life. Can you speak about that?
Yeah, I made a comment there, a couple of pages where I was contrasting traditional spirituality where the centrality of the will is very, prominent, and hard choices, whether they're, a certain amount of ascetical choice in our life and the striving after virtue, to live, as St. John of the Cross said, to sanctity is conformity of our will with the will of God. And that understanding is a hard thing, to be faithful in marriages, to be faithful in the priesthood. But therapeutic spirituality is very self-focused. And this idea of, maybe we hear it in sermons, that we're wounded, that we are, the whole notion of victimhood, that we have suffered hurts, from others, from society. That turning on self, sometimes people never get out of that. And, real spirituality is generous. It's turning toward others, giving our time away, to live a family life as a mother and father and live for children. You can't really live a therapeutic spirituality in that. You have to be very self-giving. And I think that's hurt religious life in our time. It's hurt seminary training at times, and sometimes it's gotten out there as the whole notion of healing, that we have to be healed, and then maybe we can start living a more serious spiritual life. Now, I think you get healed. I've seen it with many volunteers and missionaries of charity. You get healed by giving yourself to other poor people, and by giving yourself away. There's a beautiful healing that takes place in that. Language does affect these things. If we talk about being wounded, this is why people sometimes speak of their sins as addictions. I'm wounded, I don't have control, and maybe priests are thinking, well, we don't want to encourage, a Pelagian approach that it's all up to our own will. But, life is a struggle. And, people struggle in the world, for things. Well, we have to struggle spiritually. And, the reality of, wounding God is really much more important in the sense of, our own self-wounds, that can become then excuses for, continuing things. But, it'd be very good if, if all of us, including myself, were much more aware of what does God see in all of these things. And he desires to give us mercy, but he also desires the pursuit of sanctity for the sake of others. And, that's maybe the great task of the coming years, to live for the souls of others.